Hello again, I am Blunty, and a year ago I built this. I called it R2 See-Through, and it has been superb as my main rig. I'm super happy with it. Built on Thermaltake's Core P5 chassis and made to show off the components and to make my life easier when it comes to swapping out GPUs, and even more easy for getting nice camera shots of them for reviews. And of course, made to just kind of look sweet on camera with me. Built around the color complementary red-green color match, it's fully RGB of course, so I can match the lighting with whatever I like. This was also my very first time doing a custom hardline water-cooled system, and I think I did a damn fine job of it too, but for the fact that the return tube from the CPU to the reservoir was just in the way of 2 of the 4 RAM slots, so half a year back when I went to swap in 4 sticks of CORSAIR white LED RAM for a review, I found out they wouldn't fit. So rather frustratingly, I just had to test 2 of them for that review, which didn't look halfway as cool, or I guess it did look exactly halfway as cool. 2 is half of 4. But in general, as a build, I'm pretty happy with it. Its performance was superb, and I loved how it came out looking. Except, and that's the thing about custom building PCs, there's always an except, as you can see, there's a few dark voids that throw off the visual balance a bit. The RAM, the radiator's lower quarter, under the SSD there, and the power supply area. And all of this could look better. And will look better, because I'm going to rebuild it, and while I'm at it I may as well upgrade a few components along the way. So it's rebuild time, going from this to this. And I got there with some help from the teams at MSI, CORSAIR and Thermaltake. Thank you very much, you guys know I love you. First up, after my frustration with my water cooling and CORSAIR's white LED RAM, CORSAIR very recently released something I asked for in my original review. They now have fully RGB RAM. So now I can match it with whatever colors I have the rest of the rig set to. And as I'm also swapping out the CPU, the motherboard, and water block, I can, and indeed have to, make new tubes so I can make sure the damn RAM fits this time. In fact, I used some of this CORSAIR Vengeance RGB RAM in a recent Riing build I did live on stream, and it looks ridiculously badass. Sleek, aggressive, and beyond all that, you know, it's got CORSAIR's reputation under it, which fills me with unlimited confidence. What I have here specifically is the 4-stick kit of 8GB 2666 DDR4 for a total of 32 glorious glowing gigabytes. The RGB is completely controlled in software, and in fact, I'm switching to an MSI motherboard, and MSI's own onboard RGB control works directly with CORSAIR's RAM, right there in MSI's own software. It's awesome! Plus, there's no dangly wires or crap hanging off the RAM like there is with other RGB RAM options I've tried, so that's nice. Also, while we're talking about CORSAIR stuff, although this is not a sponsored component, this is a part I already had, but until recently was in another rig, I'll be adding the super zippy CORSAIR Neutron Series XTi SSD, 480GB worth, because frankly I've started hitting the walls of the 240GB HyperX M.2 drive I have been using for games that really benefit from very fast SSD speeds, and I have been hitting those walls pretty hard. I've been deleting and reinstalling a lot of games off that thing recently. Next up, again, not a sponsored part, but a significant part of the upgrade, an Intel Core i7-7700K. And yes, I know all about the fact that it runs pretty friggin' toasty if you overclock it, and Intel's silly advice of, hey, just don't overclock it, no problem. No, Intel. But you know what? You saw the cooling rig I run on this thing, right? I deliberately vastly overbuilt it for a system that is, in fact, just cooling the CPU. It is way overboard. Mainly I did this to make sure the fans never ever need to spin up past idle speeds, because I record in front of this thing and I need it to be silent. But it also means there's so much thermal mass in this system, even burning an overclock on Intel's toaster chip shouldn't be an issue. To go on top of that chip to make sure it stays cool, and also not a sponsored part by the way, I'm swapping out my water block for a Thermaltake Pacific W4 RGB. It replaces the Pacific W2 I have in there now, which performed superbly by the way, love it, flawless, but the W4 looks way more awesome. It fits with the glowing ring style of the overall build lighting, and of course is RGB, which the W2, although it can light up, is not truly RGB. They give you little green plastic slips to put over the light to change the color, and the green plastic panel they give you to make it glow green doesn't actually match the green of the rest of my rig, so I had to turn it off because it was annoying me. I still actually have some of Thermaltake's hardline tubing left over from the initial build a year ago, so I'll be using that to bend new hardlines. And I also bought a fresh bottle of Thermaltake's C1000 opaque green fluid, which for a year now has been perfect in the rig. It hasn't discolored even in the slightest. Nice work on that, Thermaltake. I'll be sticking with your fluid for whatever color I use from here on in, I think. Thermaltake did come to the party with a couple of sponsored parts though, including the new Riing Plus fans, RGB like my existing Thermaltake Riing fans, but these new ones are much fancier in how they're set up, and better yet, they're software controlled. I will take a closer look at these in a separate video because there's a bunch of neat custom stuff you can do and I'd like to look at that in detail. Thermaltake also sent me a Toughpower DPS-G RGB 650 watt power supply. Now, when I first built R2 See-Through, they did have this line of power supplies, and obviously its RGB Riing fan was going to be perfect for the build, but it wasn't a line of products at the time. It was just one product, and the one product they had with this RGB Riing fan in it was an insanely powerful and expensive overkill 1250 watt unit. But over the last year since then, they've brought out several more practical options for people like you and me, including this ideal 650 watt unit. Hooray! Beyond just having the right look for the rig, it's also fully modular, making my cable management easier, and it has an extremely smart software control and monitoring, letting you monitor all kinds of things about your power usage. You can even remotely control and schedule your PC's power state from the app if you need to. It is a very smart power supply. And lastly from Thermaltake, a brand new product by the way, they've only just launched some new PCIe extensions. This of course is how I mount my GPU, and although you can't see it behind it, the Elgato HD60 Pro capture card, vertically in the rig. The new premium ones though are a huge step up in quality, not just in a cleaner look, but they're much more robust. This is easily the best built riser cable I've ever laid hands on. Every system builder and modder out there has been aching for something of this quality. Sure, it's hardly a sexy part of your build, but the difference it'll make to the clean look of the build, not to mention the vast boost in your own confidence about the robustness of the build, totally worth it. The standard PCI riser cables you'll commonly get, as I'm sure anyone who's used them will agree, always feel pretty fragile. You're scared to bend them. You have to do it real careful, real slow. You have to be so careful with bending them around, especially right at the connector, of course. In fact, the very first riser I ever installed in R2 See-Through had a fault right at the connection, and I had to replace it. But this thing, their new premium stuff, man, I love it. The build is just second to none. It is so great. And every time I need a riser cable from here on in, I want one of these. They do come in various lengths, by the way. The one I've got here is the 300mm one, which is more than I needed, but I'd rather have too much than not enough, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. And finally, but kind of most importantly, I'm upgrading the motherboard. And of course, I'm on Team MSI these days as part of their new Dragon Squad group. So of course, I'm bringing some Dragonfire to R2 See-Through. This board, in fact, was not a sponsored part for this build. It was actually initially sent to me for review before I was even a Dragon Squad member, in fact. But a whole bunch of stuff got in the way of actually making that review, and I kind of feel a bit crappy about the MSI employee who sent it to me in the first place, because I made her wait, and I kind of screwed her over a little bit. But MSI are good people, and they let me slam it into this rebuild instead. Thank you for your patience, by the way, MSI motherboard people. I'm sorry I made you wait so long to get this thing on camera, but you know, shrug, crap happens. This MSI Z270 Gaming M5 is one of their enthusiast gaming motherboards, built to be tough, built to be reliable, and built to satisfy overclockers and tuners. And of course, in my case, it's also very nice that it comes with MSI's on-board Mystic Sync RGB lighting control. It is, as you may imagine, an extremely feature-rich board. It'll support RAM speeds up to a dizzying 3800 MHz. It has two M.2 slots, one of which I'll be using for that HyperX drive. The other one I'll probably either fill with one of CORSAIR's superfast NVMe drives, which I've been dying to get my hands on, or perhaps I'll slam in one of Intel's new Optane sticks to kick system performance up another notch, because of course MSI do fully support the new Optane memory. Come to think of it, maybe I'll just dump the HyperX stick altogether and do both CORSAIR's NVMe and Intel's Optane sticks in there. Ooh, that'll kick the system. And of course, with motherboards at this level, you've also got USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-A, USB 3.1 Gen 1, 7.1 channel high-definition audio with MSI's Audio Boost 4 and Nahimic 2 systems, which I've used on their laptops and really like. I've said it before and I'll say it again. So one of the things I really do like about the way MSI do things, they pay a lot of attention to the audio side of things, which of course, for people like me who create video content, is kind of important. I also like MSI's Click BIOS 5. It's another factor I really like about MSI. It makes overclocking nice and straightforward, and the entire sort of layout of the BIOS is very sensible. You never have to hunt for anything. It's everything is where you expect it to be. That's not always the case with BIOS systems, which, you know what I'm talking about. It's got steel armor on the slots, a heat spreader for one of the M.2 ports, no less than 6 fan headers, although in my case I don't actually need a single one of the fan headers. It is important to note nonetheless when talking about this motherboard, because a lack of fan headers has frustrated me more than once in years past. 6 is a pretty good number. And past the feature sets of the motherboard, the dark monotone look of the board in general, including the I/O cover and heat sinks, mean that nothing here will clash with whatever lighting scheme I choose to use. It even has some RGB LEDs on the board itself, like on the chipset heatsink, which look kind of cool. And by the way, one more thing I like about the way MSI do things, their software side for controlling all the feature sets, their MSI gaming software and stuff. It's remarkably clean and sensible for this kind of stuff. And yes, I know I'm gushing on about several MSI things here, and yes, I know I'm on board with MSI as part of the Dragon Squad, but as always, I'm speaking from my heart. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say, and I wouldn't have signed up with MSI in the first place unless I loved their stuff, so, take it for what that's worth. So, when all said and done, meet the new R2 see-through in all its over-the-top RGB glory. The only thing from here I'm hoping to kick up is changing up the Founders Edition GTX 1080 I have in there with either something like the monotone RGB-friendly MSI GTX 1080 Ti Duke 11G OC, which besides being yet another brutal power upgrade, 1080 Ti FTW, but it will also look far more badass, matching the style of the motherboard perfectly. It's certainly a better fit than MSI's standard red cooler, which I love the look of, but it doesn't quite look right in this rig with all the other green lights around it, which is why when I review one of MSI's standard cooler cards, I changed the color scheme of this rig overall to red. You may have noticed that in the reviews. But then again, there's also the MSI GTX 1080 Ti Aero 11G OC, which is just as sleek and clean looking as the Founders Edition, but it's black and has that green zap across it, matching my standard green color scheme perfectly. That'd look awesome in there too, don't you think? But then again, who knows what AMD are about to bring to the table with Vega, so maybe there's a place for whatever Vega brings. We'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, point is, I'm really digging the newly enhanced and better balanced look of my new rig. Yes, it's a bit ridiculous. Yes, it's over the top looking. And yes, I don't care a bit. I love it. So drop a comment in the down below area if you'd like to see some more info on any of the components I've talked about here. There is already a video planned for the RGB Plus Ring lights thingies. Did I say that right? Wait, what is it? Ring Plus RGB fans. The fans. I'm going to talk about the fans in a video. But if there's anything else you want me to focus on, let me know in the down below area. Maybe it will earn its own dedicated video. Not that I have much time before I have to go to Computex, which will, whatever. Thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.